A most significant crisis is planned, and the fact that the right-wing opposition has openly set out to capture power by force paints it as either Georgian or Yugoslav scenery as the People's Revolution can be missed only by the blind. Newspaper 2000, September 2004. When all government buildings were blockaded, the president's residence was blockaded too. When the president stayed in Kontra Zaspa as if in exile and was in essence rendered powerless, it is my understanding that the president had no right to stay back. As long as he was the constitutionally elected president, he was responsible for the fate of the people and Ukraine.
Во-первых, я бы себе никогда не простил в жизни своей. И я думаю, что те, кому бы я давал...
Leonid Kuchma, former president of Ukraine.
Пойти на силовой метод.
I would have never allowed myself to use force because blood would have been spilled. And the other side wanted to shed blood. I knew it. Many others knew it. I was informed that the first to arrive there, at the square, Maidan, were 10,000 of their militia fighters.
И второе. Пропаганда ихняя настолько здорово сработала, что на площади...
And the propaganda worked so well that there were thousands of children, school children. I am not talking about university students. Entire school classes came. So fight with whom? With children? Disperse children by force?
Так с кем? С детьми? Детей разгонять силой.
Those who appealed to people to storm the bastions of the bandit regime were at the point of no return. The people thought they had come to vote, but in reality, they came to take power at any cost. At night, when the fate of the Orange Revolution was sealed, the phone rang in the office of Leonid Kuchma. It was Colin Powell, the U.S. Secretary of State, who was particularly concerned about the likely use of force against innocent protests.
Я ему однозначно сказал, что я даже не хочу говорить на эту тему, потому что этой темы не существует.
I told him unequivocally that I did not even want to talk about it, because it was not even an issue. But I did ask him, please, call the Orange Revolution leaders, whose names you know so well, and share your concerns with them too. I also asked the question, if the White House was stormed under any flag, would you defend it? His response, silence.
В ответ молчание практически, но он тут же...
But then came a signal from Washington, and ours, Orange, at least stopped the insinuations of the possible forceful seizure of all government departments.
Силовой захват всех органов власти.
В тех событиях, которые уже начались в ноябре 2004 года, Кучма проявил себя грамотно.
During those events, Kuchma proved himself a competent politician, if we consider the policy as the search for compromises.
Но его вина, честно, вот когда-нибудь скажу ему лично в глаза.
His mistake was that he did not start a political reform that took place in a few hours during the Orange Revolution. It should have been implemented earlier, in 2001, 2002, when he realized in which direction the situation was headed.
Не начал ее раньше, тогда же в 2001-2002 годах, когда понял, к чему все идет.
The authorities must use all available legal means to prevent any possibility of influencing Ukrainian elections. In addition to financial investments, the possibility of planned actions by foreign institutions to present elections as illegitimate should be taken into account. Arguments of election fraud can be utilized by extremists to use force to seize power. Newspaper 2000, March 2004.
Я на всех переговорах говорил, что я буду поступать только в соответствии с нашими законами. Ни в коем случае не...
During all negotiations, I've always said that I act strictly in accordance with our laws. I will not cross legal boundaries in any direction. So what should I think if the morning after the first round of elections, I get a call from the U.S. Secretary of State who tells me that we have rigged the elections. So here you go. Of course, this scenario was created with our Ukrainians' help, but elsewhere. And we, Ukrainians, were just good performers.
В другом месте. А наши просто были хорошие исполнители.
Russia really did not interfere with the events. It had many levers of authority in Ukraine, but it did not use them. Let it be Ukraine. If it's not ready to vote yet, think about itself. Let the Ukrainian people think. Let them pick Yushchenko and Tymoshenko. Have Yushchenko and Tymoshenko work and operate Ukraine. Let the Ukrainian people on their own experience be convinced for who they really need. The plan composed at Yushchenko's headquarters was easy to predict. The voting results that were received and accounted for prior to anyone else, including prior to the CES, will bring Yushchenko victory. Next, apply pressure on the CES, coercing it to recognize the people's expression of will.
Сегодня уже начинают понимать и говорят, что никакой фальсификации ведь нет.
Sergei Kivalov, deputy of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, chairman of the CES in 2004. Today we begin to understand that there was no fraud. They said that the votes were falsified. Yet it turns out that the voting protocols from all the district committees were received. None were appealed, and all were signed, including by representatives of political party Nasha Ukraina. What do you do with that? Another route was chosen. Demonstrations of political distrust in the CES because the chairman of the CES was stubborn.
Центральной избирательной комиссии очень несговорчивый.
Therefore, the chairman of the CES had to be removed. After that, deal with all other matters that have been thought out and clearly defined. The plan was in place as to how to act in any given situation. The Supreme Court acted illegally in hearing the complaint against the CES. It illegally appointed a date for new elections, illegally continued the whole process. Today, unfortunately, all of this casts doubt on the legitimacy of the elections in 2004. What kind of play could be expected to play out on the streets of cities on November 1st, taking into account the plans of the opposition? Several 100,000 people were trucked to Kyiv. Television monitors were installed to broadcast what was happening in regional centers. Extremists from civil organization Pura held rallies near the CES building. Students were actively recruited for action. The Truthful channel for the election period blasted non-stop propaganda. Next, Yushchenko appeared and announced that his victory had been stolen. All the subsequent events in the country were the concluding phases of the coup, successfully carried out by its orchestrators under the guise of a fierce political struggle. Extensive expertise on how to indoctrinate the masses accumulated through world history with all of its indispensable theatrical attributes played out on the Ukrainian stage. The role of extras went to talented young people who eagerly arose to the challenge, inflamed by the idea of the struggle for freedom, lured by propaganda, cleverly distributed by opposition media, and by wild dances on the Maidan, the name of the song by Ruslan, a Eurovision contest winner. History has the validated analytical vision and forecasts of Newspaper 2000. Most of what the weekly's writers, in hopes of being heard, had predicted for 7 years came true, but the euphoria of Maidan clouded voices of reason, drawing millions of people into the vortex of colored revolutions, whose waves are now rushing at the borders of other states.
В России, конечно, мы видим проект похожий начат уже. Конечно же, там сейчас.
We can already see the makings of a familiar project in Russia. They are already preparing for presidential elections, and of course, we can see that Boris Berezovsky will not rest. We will soon learn of things worse than the Litvinenko poisoning by polonium. Things are yet to come. But I know that a revolution, largely due to Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan, will not receive such an open-armed welcome among the middle class in Russia.
Среди средних слоев населения, как это было здесь.